My name is Vanessa Woolf. Hello, everyone. And my job is I'm a professional storyteller. And the rabbi at Chabad Islington has asked me to come and share a story with you all about. Well, you'll have to see if you can guess what it's about at the end. So, I spend my whole life telling stories, and I've known this story for ages, but I hadn't really thought about it until today. And it's all about someone who's happy. Oh, you want to hear about that, don't you? You love someone who's had a happy life. He had a happy childhood. His father was extremely wise and business savvy. Father was a tailor. And when the young man was old enough, he was able to also start work as a tailor. And his father said to him, "You want something to make people notice you. Something so everyone will go, oh, yes, he's the tailor with the whatever it is." So the young man went to the market and wouldn't luck be so kind to him? He found the most amazing piece of red cloth. It just made his heart sing, that particular shade of red, and he brought it back to his father. He said, "Right, I'm going to make some suits with this. People are going to really enjoy it." And his father said, "No, son, no. What you should do is make yourself a coat. Do it so well that you become an advertisement for your own business." And that's what the tailor did. So he had been trained really well. He was really, really good at what he did. And he did beautiful, tiny stitches because his eyesight was so good, because he was young. Sewing away, made this amazing coat. And when he put it on, everyone was like, wow. He looked so good in this red coat. And he went out in it, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's the tailor with the red coat. Oh, we should go to him." And they did. And his business absolutely boomed. And the ladies liked it. I told you it's a happy story. He fell in love, got married, had children, and he wore this red coat, and his wife really liked it as well. And then, his children started to grow up. And then, when his children were sort of that high, his wife said to him, "The cuffs on that coat are getting really frayed." "That's all right," he said. I'll just turn them over." So you turn them over and you hem them again, and that's what he did very, very well. But after a while, she said, the hem is also getting frayed." He said, "I'll just turn it up a bit. Doesn't have to be that long." He turned it up, and the same with the lapels, but you know what? It was wearing out. And his wife said, "You're not an advertisement for the business if your clothes are frayed." "But I'm the tailor with the red coat." He said, "I have to be." And she said, "How about if you cut the sleeves off and you made it into a waistcoat, or a vest, as Americans call it? How about if you made it into a waistcoat?" And he said, "I could do that." So he cut the sleeves off and he cut it down a bit, and he cut the bad bits off, but he kept the good bits. And actually, you know what? It really suited him like that. And people still liked it because the colour was so happy. It was full of energy. And when he wore it, he felt great. And people could see that, and they responded to that. And they still came. They called him the tailor in the red waistcoat. And he had a red sign that matched it. And the children, they grew up a little more, and now they were, the difficult age. And they grew a little more, and his wife said to him, she said, it's getting frayed at the seam. And he said, maybe I could take it in a bit. But you know what? He couldn't take it in because he was getting a bit tubby. In fact, and his beard was getting a bit grey and a bit big. And he was definitely not as young as he was, and his stitches, they weren't as small as they were. And eventually she said, "Don't wear it anymore. It just doesn't look as good as it did. Why don't you turn it into handkerchiefs? And then you can still keep the red." He said, "Oh, it won't be so good as handkerchiefs. I like the coat. Maybe I'll get some more cloth." And he looked around in the market, but you know what? The fabric that they had, or the cloth that they had, it was good and it was red. But it just wasn't the same. It wasn't quite as good. But this was itself not quite as good now because it was so worn. And he said, "Oh, I won't throw it away. I'll make it into handkerchiefs." And he made it into handkerchiefs. And they kept those handkerchiefs and they used them to wipe the baby's nose with. And one of the handkerchiefs, the baby liked to carry it around. And you know what happens when one gets carried around. And they tried to take it away, but she would cry and cry. So they let her have it. And she ate it and she chewed it. And the other ones they used to wipe his brow when he was working. It didn't work so much now. Luckily, he had done very well for himself and he had money aside. So he was all right. He could retire now that he was old. And they used those handkerchiefs and use them and use them and use them and use them. And then they really were so fragile. They were just coming to pieces. And he said, "Wife," he said, "my darling, we are going to have to throw these away." And she said, "Could you turn them into buttons?" Yes. He said, "Let's turn them into buttons." And that is exactly what they did. So he covered buttons with the fabric. And they were so bright and colourful, he had them all the way down the front of his jacket. And whenever his children or his grandchildren, or even his great-grandchildren, used to come around, the great-grandchildren, they were only little and they had really chubby hands and they used to like grabbing hold of the buttons. And he would always go, "No, no, those are my special buttons. No, no." And anyway, he didn't actually get to wear the coat with the red buttons that long before he died, as his good father had done before him. And all his children said, "Shall we bury him in the coat with the red buttons?" And then somebody said, "No, I know what, let's have one button each." And that is exactly what they did. Each one of his children, who was now grown up, took a button. And they treasured those buttons. Every time they looked at that little tiny scrap of red, you know, sometimes one of them used it to do up the top of her dress, another one had it on his coat, one had it on a bag to fasten the bag with. And whenever they looked at those buttons, they thought about their father and how happy the buttons and the handkerchiefs had made him. And they told their children, so his grandchildren and the great-grandchildren and all their subsequent children, they told them about the waistcoat. Now only the oldest of the tailor's children could actually remember what the tailor had looked like in his full red coat and how great he had been when he had been young. But they who remembered, they told their children and their grandchildren. But you know what? People move around, things get lost, they fall off. And you know what? Those buttons are all gone now. But they still talk about them. They still tell the story and they pass it on from person to person about how happy that red made him. And in fact, thinking about those buttons made other people happy as well. And it also made them stop and think about what it really means to be happy and what it really means to have something. And so, rather than being one coat or one waistcoat or even some handkerchiefs or even like 5 buttons, it became a story which is immortal, which is a gift. And that gift I give to you. I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye.